First sip, your cup turns into a giant flower.
Yes, and I watched the first episode of The Last of Us, and I will never touch another piece of fungus ever again. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chad. It's not bad. I haven't seen any direct results from adding it, and I do add it to my regular coffee. I don't. It's not because it does have some coffee in it. And then ground up mushrooms, like the lion's bane, and I don't. It's like 5 different types of mushroom, and I don't know. It tastes good. There's nothing wrong with it. It just I don't think I've seen any difference by taking.
I just had my French Market coffee with chicory in it.
The world's best piece of mushroom is mushroom popcorn. Straight away, can't be beaten.
No mushrooms included.
Nope, it's just the shape.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, Keely, this predates you. Alex found the very best popcorn pretty much ever, and it is called giant mushroom popcorn, and it's from Amish country.
Courtney has it.
I still got about 2 pounds left. I had some yesterday. Gonna have some today.
Now I'm craving popcorn. You guys are terrible.
Gonna have to go back through the archives for the extremely elaborate full preparation lecture. I think we actually did put it in as a question at one point. Speaking of which, I got 2 minutes. I'm going to go get my non-mushroom coffee. BRB. I can make it.
I love everybody living on the edge.
If God is creator and Keely is a creator,
does that make?
As the Lord says, maybe I'm just a prettier Jesus. Who knows? That is a total joke. Do not at me. Just saying. It's a line from one of her songs. She was definitely going after the controversial angle on that album with the album cover and then her lyrics. So good for her. She
didn't tear up a picture of the Pope on live television.
She didn't do that, but who hasn't done that, you know? Just looking at Jack Ruppel's question about starting YouTube videos at Ado, which is sometimes 2 or 3 minutes in. What does he mean? Is that a reference to some kind of...
There's, if you start playing it back in the YouTube player and then you pause it at some point and then you capture the URL, I think it will start at that start point.
Oh yeah, it'll save the timestamp where you left off, and that synchronizes across your devices. If you're, Ado. I'm gonna say this wrong. Okay, Jack, if you're listening, put a note somewhere so I can see it, so I can pronounce your question properly.
The French or German word?
Adieu.
Adieu. Adieu to ye and ye and ye. From The Sound of Music.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about digital production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we'll talk about what we want to spend a little bit more time on. So we're going to be talking about computer graphics. So what do we want to cover? What do we want to talk about? So if you've got ideas, it doesn't have to be questions. You can jump into Makana and ask those and put those in. So if you have suggestions for things you'd like to know, whether it's 2D graphics, photogrammetry, 3D graphics, compositing, motion graphics, all those things are things that we cover on Tuesdays. And if you have ideas of what you'd like to see, then go ahead and start throwing those into Makana. Otherwise, go ahead and throw in questions for the first hour. And Keely, what do we have?
We're kicking it off with Paul Wall, who's in Austin, Texas. How does the Asus ProArt PA32 UCG monitor deliver stunning HDR performance with 1600 nits peak brightness and 120 hertz refresh rate?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it does it by having a whole bunch of mini LEDs behind that little 32-inch panel that will blind you and let you never be able to see your monitor again at 1600 nits. If you're sitting that close to it, can be quite painful, and it's only slightly more painful than the pain of paying $3,500 for a computer monitor.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I'll tell you how. 3,000 plus price tag, only 4K resolution, spread out at 32 inches. And a PPI that's lower than Retina, and then just variable refresh rate, which is actually part of the spec. So I'm not impressed.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, I've seen a lot of things at a variety of nits, 1600 nits, 2000 nits, 4000 nits. In fact, there is a monitor. Well, it's not really a monitor, but there's a 30,000 nit display that sits inside of a building that I've worked in the past, and so. The interesting thing is that when we think about nits, one of the things we were looking at samples that were done in, that if you're in a white wall in an alley, they looked at that and during on a day, but it was in the shade, was 9,000 nits. so we're used to looking at a lot of nits as they are. It's really the surrounding area, the overall ambient light, and how that affects where our irises are. That's the real issue. That we have to be careful of is looking at a really high nit with a very dark area is not great, because your irises will open up and and it doesn't really manage that. So those are the things to think about there. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff bouncing around that is 1600 nits is becoming kind of state, like that's what you expect from a relatively something that says HDR. I mean, they started calling that at 600 nits, which most of us don't consider really HDR. So anyway, 1600 nits is a number that's becoming more accepted in that area, and usually that's the peak, not the regular. What you're seeing. When something's 1600 nits, it means the highlights are going to be 1600 nits, but a lot of things are going to sit at 600, 800, 1000 nits. Next question.
It's from Andy Carluccio in San Francisco, California. What's Universe showing at Pro Light and Sound at the Future Walk?
Universe has definitely announced a new controller for Zoom, and it looks pretty impressive, and I still don't have all the information for it. So basically, it's an appliance, though, that Universe is putting out. So what we'll do is we'll do a little research. We're going to see if we can bring them in. Pro Light and Sound is in Germany, and it's 9 hours ahead of us, but we're going to see if we can get Andy and some of the crew to join us tomorrow morning, probably top of the hour. So stay tuned for that, and we'll talk more about it in detail. Next question.
It's Gordon Lake from Los Angeles, California. Would the Blackmagic 2100 IP converters be a more cost-effective solution instead of fiber for getting cameras to the switcher? With 2 converters and a 300-foot Cat7 cable between them, you get 3 inputs and 3 outputs for under $1,500. Go
ahead, Courtney.
Maybe, but at 300 feet, you probably might as well use standard coax SDI, RG6 or something, some high quality that can carry, and it depends on what resolution you're trying to send back from those cameras, if you're sending 4K or not. If you're not sending 4K, then coax is the way to go.
Go, Jason.
Yes, that is cheaper than fiber, and fiber's only getting warmed up at 300 feet. So, it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't use SDI over 150 feet. so typically, I switch over or 200 feet at the very outer edge. It could be, but at 300 feet, for me, I would mostly switch to fiber because that's what I know the best, and I've got lots of converters already. As a cost-effective way to do it, 3 in, 3 out, at that distance is actually pretty good. And I think that the real advantage of 2110 is not necessarily long runs, because the other thing to look at is 2110 across that run, even on a Cat 7, 300 feet maybe on the outer edge of that as well. So we want to be kind of careful of that. What really is the advantage of 2110 is routing, being able to more seamlessly route between things. I wouldn't necessarily use it as a long run solution. Next question.
Our next question comes from Liberty White, who's in Atlanta, Georgia. Yesterday, Grant mentioned Sage during the show. I received 2 Sage emails in the past 24 hours. I know our devices are always listening, but how can one prevent this from happening?
The reality is it probably wasn't connected. Sage is doing a really big event, which is why we were talking about it, which is also why they're sending emails out. so they're, so the thing is that, the timing was, we were talking about something. I don't think that there was any, the reality is that they don't have to listen to you to figure out what's going on. So a lot of times you'll go, well, I have a conversation with, I had a conversation with a friend that, about something, and then suddenly it popped up. Now, what is more likely happening, which could be a little scarier, is that the phones know that they're together. So the phones know that the two of you were standing next to each other for X amount of time, and your friend was searching about a bunch of things. That's why it came up in the conversation. And then it can derive that, well, you might have talked about that, so I'm going to tell you something. But that's a much more likely thing than it actually passing audio information around, because in the reality is, in many states that's illegal. So the thing is that you can't actually legally just grab onto audio, but you can grab onto metadata. And so metadata tends to be more of, if you searched Sage, while we were doing the show, then it's more likely to, or brought it up or whatever. Now, the other thing is that you are potentially connected with metadata to all of us. So if we all search Sage while we were talking about it, it may be able to build that graph. So there's a bunch of things that are related to that. It's probably, the chances of it being actually listening to you is not zero, but very, very close to it. as almost as close as you can be without being zero. Mostly because they don't need it, and the reality is audio is not super efficient to process, whereas metadata is super efficient. And there's they can derive an enormous amount of information around choices related to that. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, sorry I missed yesterday. I'm going to have to ask here. I was just about to search for what is Sage, and I stopped myself because I didn't want to get the emails. What is Sage?
Sage is the Events by Sage, or I think it's Events by Sage, and this is Blue Melnick and his wife's event company. So Obvio is what they built with Grant, and we talked a little bit about it because it was being used in Tony Robbins' event yesterday. So the big event yesterday was that's what that. We discussed it a little bit yesterday. But I don't think, again, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Again, there are organizations that can listen to your audio, but it's probably not connected to Sage, those organizations. And so
the NSA doesn't send out ads either.
Yeah, you know exactly. They're like, let's send some ads out about an event company, but not very many organizations can get a hold of that information without FISA. So anyway, so I think that you're probably okay. But I do think what happens really is it looks at the relationship. What our systems are really good at is looking at the relationship between people. So if it's built relationships because you've been on the show a bunch with all of us and we all did searches, it can definitely affect the graph of making decisions about, oh, well, you may have been in that conversation. So those are the kind of things they can figure out, but listening to you is probably not one of them. It's against the law in most states. Next question.
Paul Walhus is back from Austin, Texas. Did you watch the Art of Living first of its kind virtual live event? It was 6 hours and still up on YouTube. Was it the biggest Zoom and YouTube event ever?
Go ahead, John.
I don't know if it was the first of its kind. I mean, we had no visibility into Zoom. We watched for, I don't know, half an hour or so, and they had about 400,000 people on YouTube. No way to tell what what their audience size was on Zoom because you had to pay to be a VIP on Zoom, but it looked very much like a Tony Robbins production, a little too much actually. They had fake crowd noise and fireworks and all kinds of stuff behind the speakers. So I don't know, not my cup of tea.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I think the biggest event actually happened in 2020, something with some rabbi. I don't know all the details on that, but it was that hit about 100,000 on Zoom and YouTube. And then, of course, you have that whole weighing between who's on Zoom, who's on YouTube type thing. Does that count as part of the numbers? Or because we, like Preto said, we watched it for about 30 minutes and then felt too evangelistic, so it just kind of left from there. So where do you gauge the numbers from?
Yeah, and I think that it's hard to tell what the biggest Zoom and YouTube event is. As said, I don't know which ones were which. As far as a YouTube event, it probably doesn't even show up in the top 10,000. Like it's not, like there's the largest Zoom event I think is still the Stratus jump. And so that was the Red Bull jump from 120 some thousand feet. And that, I think that was at 8 million concurrent viewers or something like that. And so that's still the high watermark on YouTube. There's other live streams that I've worked on that are considerably more viewers than that concurrent. So it's not, those numbers are not, they're big for an event and if in an event that includes Zoom, but you just want to kind of keep it in track that from a event perspective, we're still just getting started. Next question.
Our next question comes from Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Do you know a way to start YouTube videos at a do, which is sometimes 2 or 3 minutes in? Why do we model modern video creation after 1950s commercial TV?
Go ahead, Keely.
Yeah, this is a great point because of all the training and coaching that I've been getting as a live streamer, a video producer, is stop with the introductions, get right into the content. And personally, if I hear, so let's dive in one more time on any of the videos I watch, I'm probably going to do some serious violence to myself. We do need to get into a new formula and a new pattern. And it's just a matter of what we're comfortable with. We think that we need to mimic what we've learned from all that time, but it's a new venue. It's a new method to delivering information. And we, as people who are on YouTube, need to actually dive right in.
You go ahead, Jeffrey.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button there. So I basically, to do this, you can't do this in YouTube natively, but if you want to go on a website, all you have to do is hit the share button and then go down and find the time marker that you would start at. And then you can send that to Twitter. You can send that to websites and all that other thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing is within YouTube, you can set chapter markers. So you can have an intro and then you have, here's the content. And then they just have to scroll down a little bit on there. I have actually talked to YouTube several times about possibly making some sort of pass through. So, because sometimes you need it. Sometimes you need that intro. And for a lot of intros that happen on YouTube, there's a lot of people that realize, okay, this creator creates a 30-second intro, which is nice, but I always want to skip it. And it would be nice to say, okay, every time you play this video, skip that intro. But I agree with Keely. I've stopped doing a lot of my intros, and at the most, my intros are like 1 to 2 seconds in any of my videos.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, what I do is I have a player called SmartTube Next, which is it's a side-loadable player. If you have anything that runs Android TV, like on my TV set, or a Fire TV, or a Google Chromecast as your player, you can sideload this application and it skips over automatically. You can set it to, it has whole classes of stuff it'll skip. It never plays commercials. There's no in-rolls. There's no pre-rolls. There's no mid-rolls. There's no post-rolls. It will automatically skip over a standard opening right to the very first frame of the content. It'll skip over self-promotion in the middle of a YouTube video. It'll skip over all automatically. So look for SmartTube Next, and if you have something that will play it, it won't. Apple players, I don't think it will work on, but if you use a Fire TV or a Android TV of some sort, you can sideload it and watch all your YouTube videos without any commercial interruptions or any self-promotions or any regular opens.
Yeah, we have an intro for this show, but I try to keep it to about between 30 seconds and a minute, and I look at it as an overall percentage of the entire show. So in our show is 2 hours long, so I feel like I can buy a minute to tell you why you're here, and it also is more of a pattern for us just to get into the zone because it's a live show. I have thought about cutting that completely out in the post, out of past the countdown clock, and felt like it would feel a little odd just to jump straight in if you've never seen it before. So we try to keep it really short. But when it comes to short videos, if you're doing a 5-minute video or 8-minute video, as everybody else said, the whole intro thing is over. Like you gotta, if you're doing an 8-minute video, you have to not do anything else. And one of the other things we talk a lot about is stacking the video. So one of the things that people do to try to hang on and get longer view times is to put the interesting things at the end. And what a lot of us are starting to talk about as we build some content, and I build them for other clients. Eventually I'll build it for us, but I'm building so much for other clients that I don't get time to actually do it here. But one of the things that when you stack it, we're basically no intro, and we put all the things that you want and really line up with whatever we told you we were going to show you in the first 90 seconds. So it is dense in that first 90 seconds. Then we keep going, but we actually make it less and less important and more detailed. Not less important, but like, let me show you how this works. And then let me show you why this works. And here's a little bit more information if you're really into it. And so that tail is for people who basically you're giving the person who shows up at the video immediately what they wanted. So they get instant gratification. They're more likely to respond to you later, to come back to your video later. And they get the value out of your video in the first very, very short period of time. Then what we do is we then start stacking and a lot of this has to do with where you put commercials and so on and so forth. I don't do commercials, so I don't care. But so most of the stuff that I build are for people who are brands who they don't care. They're not running an ad in it. So the issue is you put all the value right in that first 60 to 90 seconds. But then you keep on adding a little bit more as you go out, so that if you're really into it, you're getting even more value. And if you wait longer, it still has to be great. But the person whatever they saw it was going to do on the thumbnail and whatever they clicked on, they get in 60 to 90 seconds, but then you keep on giving them more value if they're willing to stay longer. And it gives you a sense of it and helps kind of build that in. And I think that's probably, it feels like the future, like of what we're doing. And so I don't know if it is or not, but it really does feel like it. It's a much more pleasurable thing to watch. I can tell you that, again, I think that there's a mistake. I think the YouTubers who do really well are the ones that are really only thinking about the viewer. They're not trying to figure out where to put the ads. They're not trying to figure out the algorithm. They're not trying to figure out those things. They're trying to figure out, how do I just build incredible content that keeps you, held, into that space. And those are the ones that are doing the best, over time, when you do hundreds and hundreds of videos. If you do anything to try to manipulate the viewer, I think it's not that it doesn't work, but I think it devalues your content, and it's a pretty competitive space. So that's the thing you have to watch. Next question.
It's Michael Hillman from Sierra Madre, California. Any recommendations for music playback software with playlists for live events that work with Companion?
Go, Jeffrey.
VLC actually has a Companion plugin that you can set up and use from there. I know many people that run it that way. There are some other Companion apps, but I think you need to have some hardware or some software with that. Like for instance, if you're using vMix, you can run a playlist in vMix, and then you can just set up Companion to activate those buttons as you go from there. But VLAN or VLC is the easiest. I think I said VLAN, so I mean VLC is the easiest out of all of them.
Yeah, and things like QLab are completely tied into everything that's there, and you could definitely build a playlist there as well. I mean, there's definitely playlist programs and radio station programming things, but QLab would do it as well. Next question.
Our next question is from panelist Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin. Have you tried any of the latest rotating panoramic tripod heads yet?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So on Friday, somebody asked that question about these, and I haven't to be honest, I haven't used them in a very long time, but then I went and bought one. This is Soonfo, I think is the name of the company. And I've been really impressed with this. I'm going to set it up. Whoops, I'm going to set it up really quick so you can see what it is. So basically, it is 2.4 gigahertz. What I do with the remote, there it is right there. 2.4 gigahertz, completely changeable. So if you are jumping on top of another wireless, you can easily switch it out. The remotes have, as you can see, a little LCD on there. I can change the speed of the pan and the tilt. So if I switch over here and I run it from here, as you can see, a nice little smooth left and right, up and down. And this is at speed 4 for the up and down, and left and right is about 5. I can go up to speed 8 and as slow as 1. So I can have a really slow pan, and I can set an A/B button so it'll do its own pan from there. This also has a AI ability to it, and you just basically have to hold up your hand to stop it and then do the OK to start it. And it's a little jerky, so I probably wouldn't use this part of it, but for the most part, for anything that doesn't have let's do that really quick, stop that. For anything that doesn't have a natural PTZ to it, this is a good alternative, although you'll probably have to have more than one remote to do anything. Like if I wanted to zoom this camera, and I need the camera remote to do that. But if you have a DSLR, it does plug in, and there is a camera shutter button, so you can take pictures as you go.
Yeah, and one thing that you want to look at there is if it needs to sit on the nodal point or not. So if the lens needs to sit on a nodal point, you'll build one that's a little bit more complicated, and you probably wonder why you need a nodal point. A nodal point is the point at which on the lens, and usually there's a little mark on it, that there are a little ring that you see on a lot of lenses, and that is the nodal point. And sometimes it's further forward than you think. At that nodal point, if you rotate it around that point, there won't be any parallax. And what that means is that you will be able to, if you're shooting a panorama that you want to stitch back later, it's easier to line them all up again. So we use that a lot. So a lot of those are kind of suspend the camera. So for instance, some of the ones that we've used in the past are Edelkrone. Edelkrone has a Head Plus, and then they have a Head Plus V2 Pro, and that V2 Pro has you'll see if you look at it, you'll see that it suspends the camera and allows you to move the camera backwards so that you can get that nodal point right on that edge. And so those are things. Nodal Ninja is another one that's mechanical that we've used in the past. And these are for shooting, still panoramas. But a lot of them, some of them have motorized systems that will allow you to shoot film systems as well. A lot of times we go a little bit, if we're doing panoramic, we're using more controlled heads but with these are designed for us to shoot these large panoramas and stitch them back together relatively painlessly. Next question.
It's Douglas Carmichael asking, could you conceivably use Universe as the control hub for a residential media automation system?
100%. I think that's part of their actual business model. So you can absolutely do it. We've been looking at it for I've been looking at it for remote controlling my house, but I haven't in my copious free time. But yeah, you could absolutely have it run that. Next question.
We have Jack Cannon from Phoenix, Arizona. Any thoughts on the new DJI Mavic 3 Pro and Cine, which were just announced?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I've never seen a Mavic that costs $4,000. That was my immediate thought, but I am absolutely blown away by the flight time. 43 minutes is insane.
Yeah, so this was just, was it earlier today that was just, when he says just announced, I think it was like today it was announced. Like there was what's interesting is that it says not available in my region or country.
Yep, you have to refresh the main page and then go back and you'll find it.
Oh, is it when you go directly to it? What did it?
The CDN is like slowly getting there.
Oh, it's just slowly picking up speed. Yeah. I mean, they look amazing. And I, it's really, I think that it's hard, everyone gets concerned about, DJI and everything else, but wow, they're doing some pretty incredible, 43 minutes. There's actually the Mini 3 has 51 minutes. But really when you're starting to look at some of these, sensors and, what kind of video, I mean, I've been holding off waiting for a lot of these releases to try to figure out what I have the original Mavic. I bought the Mavic and used it a lot. And I'm trying to figure out when do I step back into it. And I have to admit, looking at the Inspire 3 was stunning. Now that's a $15,000 one, $16,000 one. I can't afford that. I don't have any good reason for it. But I will say that all of these look really good. I mean, the things that I'm looking for are typically ProRes HQ or above. I'm not, and then, what I want to see is Super 35 or above. So the Mavic, I don't think necessarily does that. I think the Cine may, and I'm having trouble because it just came out today. We're kind of juggling around a little bit to find it, to find that one specifically. But I think that this is the Cine combo for the Mavic 3. Hold on, let me look at it here. Yeah, so it's still 4/3 inch sensor. I probably wouldn't put $5,000 into a drone with a 4/3 sensor. I probably want to spend a little bit more to get myself to Super 35. So I think that's the only thing that I would kind of lean into there.
Sorry, interrupt. Isn't a 4x3 a full frame?
It is not. It's a 4/3. So
4/3 of an inch, not a 4x3. I was just looking at that recommendation. I mean that spec.
Yeah, and so yeah, so I think that I would still be trying to get a little bit more out of it. Now the reality is that you could probably do you really need a short depth of field or anything else with a drone? So the 4/3 at the resolution that it's running at is probably plenty, for that type of thing. So it's pretty. I mean, these drones have. I mean, I think it's built in, so now it has multiple cameras, and so you're able to do FPG. I know that with the other one, you're able to go into FPG mode directly, so you're able to just drop. But you're looking at, it's shooting 10-bit log. It can do 4K 120. You'll notice that a lot of cameras are able to do 120. It's very odd. So it does Apple ProRes, and I believe it does ProRes HQ. It does not do ProRes RAW. Something happened there with DJI, and I don't know what it was with Apple, but a lot of things got dropped out. I don't know whether it was a thing with Apple or whether they just decided to only put RAW into the Inspire or something happened.
I think it really just has to do with the data rates. Trying to push that through a sensor and keep it in the air for as long as you are. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's super impressive. I'm going to buy something. Maybe it may end up being this, but I'm trying to figure out what to buy and what I can afford and everything else. But the drones have the problem is the restrictions have never been worse to fly a drone, but the drones themselves are just getting to be kind of amazing. You can really get some incredible shots with them. I think that what was the Traveler show? I can't think of it right now on Apple, and I'm pretty sure all those are drone shots. I don't think that they're shooting those with helicopters. And so I think that that kind of gives you a sense of, how the drones are being used for a lot of these things. And if you definitely look at the demo for the Inspire, because they showed some stuff where they're doing what you would do in a crane, with the drone, and it looked just amazing. This martial arts scene where the drone comes around and comes down and then pulls back out and then moves around. It does a lot of things that are all kind of pre-programmed, and it's amazing. So we'll take a look at it. They look great as always, as what we would expect. It's a very mature product line at this point, so there's no real surprises other than everything just keeps getting better. Next question.
It's Junior Grant from Bronx, New York. Good day, all. What microphone paired with a MixPre 6.2 would you recommend if recording a room approximately 24 by 26 feet, a ceiling of 12 foot high, hosting an event with acoustic instruments and unmiked voices with an audience of about 60?
Microphone. I mean, I'd be really tempted to do microphones. I don't know if I would have it be, just one. So, I mean, I think that it's a big space. I mean, you're going to have two things that are kind of going back and forth. One is that that you're going to have a lot of reverb, from the room itself. But then you'll be sucking up a lot of that with folks there. I'm gonna jump out to to our audience here, and Mickey recommends a handheld mic that fits the vocal. DPA 4018 or Shure SM58 are good for general purpose. If the instrument is an acoustic guitar, go with an AKG 414, and if it is a guitar, a DI, the Sennheiser 416 and MKH 60 crowd room mic. If you want stereo crowd room, replace the DI with another 416 or 60. So those are that was the easy answer because we didn't have the answer. All right, next question.
This is Douglas Carmichael coming in with, would there be any mobile data plan that doesn't have a throttling limit?
I'll go ahead, Jason.
Mine is completely unthrottled, and it is because I have not changed it at all since 2002. So pretty much not.
Yeah, it's really hard to get them now because, especially these days, I get the warning at the end of every month of like, hey, you used up all your data, and we're going to take it away. The easiest way to do that is really try to use your Wi-Fi as often as possible. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Almost all cellular plans have all the unlimited cellular plans, unlimited data, have a throttling point because they don't want you using it as your primary internet connection all day, streaming Netflix or so on all day long, because that would eat up all their cellular bandwidth. So they don't want you hanging that up. So once you get to a certain point of 300 gigabytes, something like that, they all have cutoff points where they slow you down to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, and we used to do some streams for one of the cellular companies, and I think that the stat was something like 1% of their users use up 90% of the bandwidth. Like this was years ago, but it was definitely like a very small percentage are really hitting hammering that top end. So that's those folks don't matter to them that much. So if you're hitting the throttle, you're probably in that top end where they see you more as a liability than a valued customer. So of the usage. So that's part of the issue too. Next question.
Walhoos is back. Discuss AirTag placement in your bag, wallet, or car so it doesn't get spotted or stolen.
Go ahead, Keely.
So one thing that I've done, I travel sometimes with an Oru kayak. It's a folding kayak, really fantastic device. And it's one of those things that I know could go wandering off somehow, even though it's very large. And so what I've done is I've put 2 AirTags in it. I've put one that's really much hidden back into a far corner that you would have to unpack the whole thing and you'd have to set it up and then you'd have to go digging to find it. And then one that's very obvious. So what I'm hoping is that somebody who wanted to actually acquire themselves an Uru kayak would see that AirTag and would ditch it and then leave the one that I've had hidden. And I do that on a few of my other bags as well. And yes, it's more expensive, but I think it's a pretty good trick for anything except the most professional of thieves.
I was in the wrong page. Go ahead, Jason.
I don't personally kind of engage in subterfuge where I'm placing an AirTag. Every one of my Pelican cases has them mounted in a really nice place so that they're audible, but also, can't get whacked off by the, by an upset piece of a luggage cart. I have one in the glove compartment of my car, mostly for my own edification, and one on my backpack because I frequently leave without it and then have to turn around at the end of the street. So there's that.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So yeah, for my travel, I have a travel key. I don't take my regular keys with me, and on my travel key, I have the AirTag. And this is an interesting story because last week Chris talked about how he had an AirTag following him and couldn't figure out why. And then I realized what it was, and that it was my AirTag was sitting in the luggage. And Chris picked me up, and we went to the Gene Lake bed for some of the rocket stuff. And then, of course, I rode back with Jack. So my luggage and my phone were in 2 different places. And therefore, Chris got the notification that there was an AirTag following him. With that said, that was basically buried almost in the middle of my luggage and a whole bunch of electronics around it. So it really doesn't matter where you place it, as long as, you don't have probably like an iron case around it or something like that. I probably wouldn't be able to get through. But as Jason said, you'd want to have some place where you could hear it. But you can also find it with your phone fairly easily.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you just want to track it, you don't need to hear it. You get you some Gorilla Tape or something like, Gorilla Tape, something that you can tape it to the inside or the bottom or the side of your luggage, as long as your luggage is not metal. If it's canvas or plastic like a Pelican case, that way it hides it. Don't use the silver type duct tape because that has aluminum coating in it, and that might prevent it from getting out radio-wise. And it will, of course, impede you from hearing it, but you can still track it.
Yeah, the issue with the Apple trackers, if you're really, for stuff that you really care about, I put a lot of Apple trackers. I have over 20 of them floating around in bags, so on and so forth. It's more of a convenience thing. If I have been thinking about, for things that I really care about, putting other trackers in, mostly because then they won't warn you that they're there. And so the issue is the Apple tracker does this little alert thing, and I don't necessarily want to make it obvious that the case has a tracker in it. One of the things that I've been considering is actually putting, a tile or something else that isn't going to give you a warning. That is, that's a primary tracker, and put an Apple tracker that gives you a warning that is there, so that exactly what Keely's talking about, which is that you'll rip it off, think that you have it, and then there's still another tracker that's built into the system. And so those are the kind of things. Right now, I just kind of put them in everything, and it's less about worrying about people stealing it, and more about me just knowing where it is. Like, what did I do with that thing? And I've definitely been warned that I left a case behind that I shouldn't have. I was at an airport. I have a tendency to only use carry-on, and so if I check things, I have a bad habit of forgetting that I checked them. And I almost left the airport without a case, and it was like, "Hey, you left a case," and I was like, "How would it know?" And then I looked down. I was like, "All right, I have another case there." But now it's really fun. We send a FedEx of like 10 cases. And it's fun. You see this little group of cases going down the road, and then they sit there. And I knew one of the cases got left behind, and I'm like, "It's there." And they're like, "No, we don't know where it is in the warehouse." I'm like, "It's in the back corner, the back east corner of your warehouse. That's where it is." And they went back and they could find it. So anyway, it's kind of a fun process. Next question. Whoop, can't hear you.
It's Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia. As a person who wants to embrace DaVinci Resolve, is there any chance that there can be a lab in the future for beginners?
Yeah, we can absolutely work on getting some labs for Resolve. And so, I think that we did those labs in the past, and we just didn't get as many questions as we thought we would. And so we kind of haven't come back to them. But we can definitely, I think it's a different time now. That was 2 years ago. So I think that we can look at it. I think that, for someone like me, I do about half and half now. I'm like half Final Cut when I need to go quickly, and then I'm half Resolve when I need to be precise. I don't really know. As a user, I don't really know where Premiere fits in for me. I mean, I think people are into the marketing of it and they use it, but it's kind of in the middle. Like, it's not as precise as Resolve and not as fast as Final Cut, and there's a subscription. With both of those, my camera came with a copy of Resolve, and my camera came with a copy of Resolve and like the studio version and Final Cut, and neither of them ever charge for upgrades. So I have a really hard time. I think Premiere will be fine because Adobe is doing fine, but I don't understand, for people who are just operating out of it, I don't understand kind of the business model there. I think is difficult for Adobe at this point. They're doing great. They had a great update in this last one, but so did Resolve, and Resolve has about 3 times more engineers. So that's the issue right now. Next question.
Al Trivet from Carmichael, California. Any thoughts on Apple's latest win in the legal battle with Epic Games?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
This is a split thing for me. Of course, the biggest thing was the whole App Store and Epic wanting to do in-app purchases without having the App Store stick their hands into things, which of course can cause security issues. That's where this is all based off of. With the fact that Apple is limiting Epic on there, it's really having a hard time for people to think that Apple can be a competing gaming system with everything. In fact, I had a great conversation last week at NAB about vMix, and one of the reasons why vMix is not on Apple is because it doesn't run the graphics the same way as a PC, and therefore, if you get a gaming system, you get a PC, you don't get an Apple. And Apple really wants to try and get into that market, but I don't see them doing that by squelching or not creating some sort of partnership with Epic to make that happen. And of course, with things like Unreal Engine, we just lose out on it. So it's a lose-lose situation in my book.
This is a bad case. Like it was, and people, anyone who's listened to me talk about it. It doesn't matter what the issues are. It was a bad case. Like it was a bad case. You're trying to prove. You have to prove to make this work. You have to prove that Apple has a monopoly, and the only way to prove that Apple has a monopoly is to prove that the iPhone is materially different than an Android phone. The phones look almost identical now. Like at this point, all phones look the same. It's two different operating systems, but you have to argue that Apple, for some reason, is not a phone. It's an Apple device, and that's like saying a BMW is a BMW. So it has a lock on BMWs instead of it's part of a larger ecosystem. Apple is a minority shareholder in the world usage of phones, and so there was trying to get over that hump was impossible. Like it was impossible. Like this was a dumb thing to do from the day it happened. I understand what Epic wants, and I don't think it has anything to do with games. Epic wants to build a platform to sell things. They want to sell you goods. So they want to build the metaverse, and then they want you to buy a house and a car, like you do with Roblox. My daughter is on Roblox, and they buy items and they pass those items back and forth, and those are on fake dollars. And Epic wants to use real dollars. They want to be able to do. They want to be able to sell you things, all kinds of items that you need for the metaverse and for all the things that you're building and all the things that are there. And they don't want to pay Apple 30% of every one of those sales. That's what this is all about. They are looking out into the future, saying, this is a huge market, and they're right. It's a big market to do that, but they don't want. But Apple is going to take 30% because they're over. Now the problem is that 98% of developers are under $1 million of revenue, and so it's only 15% for them. And I could guarantee that anything that they did on their own would not be as lucrative as giving Apple 15% and selling it into the store. I'm about to sell the product that I've been, my little drawing program into it. There's no other place I'd rather put it. At 15%, I'm totally fine. I'm not going to make $1 million with this. And so I think that they're, I'll talk about it probably more in Mac Break, but it was just it was just a really poorly executed. I mean, there was no way that they were going to win this. Like I don't know what, drugs they were taking when they actually filed it, but there was no way it was ever going to make it through the system. And so anyway, so it's kind of, like, okay, well, they have a chance of getting, I mean, the European commissions may do something because they're not really connected to reality, but that's not, but so that the Europeans may do something with it because it's not in America. The Europeans don't have any real tech companies. so that's the real issue that they have. They don't care. And so, but the case itself was just a dog. I grew up in a legal family. Like you just look at cases and you go, well, that's a dog. Like that one's going to be a hard one. Sometimes you own that case and then you don't want to be doing that case, but this was a dog when it started. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back. Alex, you mentioned that larger LED walls can reach into the multi-megawatt range. I've seen smaller walls that are just a source, processor, and tiles, but how do you manage larger walls and scale and align multiple sources on different parts of the wall?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a whole. We did a great second hour with Vue, but we didn't really dig into dug into their business model, but not as much their tech. And I think it'd be probably worth coming back to do that. There are specific, companies that are, usually the processors themselves come with their own system to distribute those across. And there's a couple things that system has to do, and the systems are there's too many to just say this is the one to do it with the panels. But what they have to do is they have to manage the brightness of each panel because they're all going to be a little different. And so you have to kind of blend them all together. And then they have to map it across those. Now, there are things that definitely are designed to map across those systems, like Resolume, Arena, as well as Disguise and a bunch of other ones that are designed to work across those. But the actual low-level connection to the LED is usually built by another processor. And we'll see if we can find someone to come on and talk about it in a second hour. Next question.
It's Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. Will office hours be at InfoComm this year?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'll be at InfoComm this year. And I know there's a couple other office hours members that will also be at InfoComm. But there is going to be, as far as I know, no actual production. I might pull out my phone and do some after hours stuff, but that's basically it. I have 2 sessions that I'll be talking on, both of them doing remote work. in the field. So one's going to be a panel, and then one's going to be my own session, which is going to be a lot of fun.
And I'll be doing a session with Sam from Zoom. We'll be doing a session together on hybrid and digital events. So but I'll be coming in virtually. Next question.
It's from Eduardo Augustine from Panama. Which other alternatives to a telestrator in Mac OS and Win OS without doing the ATEM method would you recommend? I
don't know of any, to be honest. I mean, I don't know of any that are sold that are doing this. I mean, there's some, like there's software that's made by New Tech that will do the telestration piece. So that's the only software I know. I think it's like $1,300 for that for that system. And when I looked at it, I was like, well, you could buy a Mac Mini and the Wacom that I had, and something really inexpensive, and still have the same product, and it would be hardware and it'd be in and out. So yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
This couple of years ago, because you had the NDI, but there was also another one. I'm looking for it really quick. It's called Panimation. I actually did a video on this back in 2020. It is a PC-based telestrator, and it does have NDI in, so you can bring the screen in via NDI. You can telestrate on it and then send it back out via NDI. It's last time I'm looking at my article that I wrote for it a couple of years ago. It's $195 for the software, and I can put my link into that, and you can take a look to see if that's still around.
Go ahead, John.
The budget method is to chroma key out using software-based switchers. So David Paskin and I do very similar. So I run Procreate on the iPad with the green screen behind the illustrations, and then I chroma key that out in OBS. And it's clunky, but it works.
Next question.
Our next question comes from Matthias Utila from Helsinki, Finland. He downloaded Beastcam to iPhone yesterday, and the one-time purchase is the same price as the Filmic Pro 1-week subscription. The only differences for him is that the Filmic has flat and log profiles and support for Frame.io. Why would panelists choose Filmic instead of Beastcam?
Mostly because most of us know Filmic really well, and we don't know Beastcam. I just downloaded it. I didn't even know Beastcam existed until you recommended it here. So I'm downloading. I paid my $2.99, and if you ask that question again next week, I may have shot some stuff with it and thought about it. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer is back. What is your favorite travel tripod?
My favorite travel tripod is the Mi Photo is my favorite one, but I also have a couple other ones. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm a monopod guy, but then again, I do my videos a lot different than some people travel with these high-end tripods because they need them. And but my cameras are fairly small, so the monopods are perfect for me.
And which monopod do you use?
Well, you saw the Sarui. I have a couple other brands I can't think of offhand. But the biggest thing is about those feet and how they set on the ground, especially in a padded carpet situation. The Sarui one I have, which I found out the Sarui, who was at NAB, actually got rid of the bigger feet. We got the smaller feet. And so we had a nice little conversation on why that was, because it was just one of those qualifiers that I have. I know that Manfrotto also has something where the feet kind of extend out. So you bring them down and then you can pull them out and give them a little bit longer foothold on the ground. So I'm going to be looking into those. But the best part about if you're gun and run type situation, taking the monopod, lifting it up, moving to the next spot, dropping it down is just so much easier than trying to pull out a tripod.
Yeah, and the one that I've used for a long time are the Mi Photo Globetrotters. One of the things that's a requirement for me is that I have to be able to fit it into a carry-on. So when I fold it all up, I need to be able to drop it into a carry-on. There's also the Manfrotto 190, which I've used a fair bit, which has a little handle on it for smaller things that I've used. But the main thing is that it has to be able to, when I set it into a standard carry-on, it has to be able to just drop straight into it, not go at an angle, but drop straight in. Now, there are some of the ones that are a little bit larger that sometimes have a head that I have to screw off and put it in. That's okay if I'm looking for a heavier tripod, but you want to look at that. And I don't usually I admit for my tripods, I don't worry too much about a fluid head. And that mostly has to do with the fact that I think that most fluid heads that cost less than $2,000 are really not that great. So I'm probably not going to do slow moves with them anyway. So I have a tendency to get, just a ball head that I'm going to have there that I can easily kind of reorient and flatten the camera out. When I'm taking a travel tripod, I don't have expectations of doing a lot of camera moves because mostly I'm super sensitive to how it looks. Next question.
It's Douglas Carmichael asking, I remember watching a Korean streamer in 2016. They were streaming from a yacht via the then new LTE on a river in Seoul. While there was macro blocking, the stream never dropped out. Why could this be?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Very dense LTE cell sites all up and down the river, probably. Cellular is designed to hand off from one cell site to the next without any packet loss, technically. And if you don't know how much buffering was going on there, it could be 2 or 3 seconds worth of buffering so that any packet loss can be resent when it reaches the next LTE cell tower. And there's always usually overlap, and major metropolitan areas like in Seoul have a lot of cell points. And I imagine if the river is used a lot for transportation, that they're going to put those cell towers up along the river's edge, so you could go all the way up and down the river without ever losing contact. It's kind of like trying to live stream between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. There's cell towers all along the way, and rarely does data drop out during that whole trip.
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree. The river you're talking about is called the Han River. I've been down it a couple times. Spent many times in 2018, 2019 in South Korea. And South Korean Telecom, SK, is what you'll see the logo as. They are investing lots of money, not only in the technology. The Korea invests a lot in their startups. They invest a lot in anything to get them further and get companies to come to Korea to create their products and sell their products. So they are, even hotels have these high bandwidth connections, and they'll even give you hotspots. So if your phone doesn't have local connection, then you can take the hotspot with you to use your phone for whatever you need. So I don't know about the towers out along the Han. I never thought I saw any towers, but it's definitely a great place to have any type of bandwidth.
Next question.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia is back. Could the panel recommend a tripod for use with my setup in the future with my ICANN teleprompter and maybe gigs in the field?
Yeah, as we started to go to heavier tripods, a lot of the ones that we've looked at from a cost-effective perspective. So again, the heads don't have to be perfect, but there are a lot in the Benro line. So Benro is a relatively, for heavier tripods, because once you start putting a teleprompter on, it's a heavier head. So you have, you're going to have a larger head that is going to have more weight to it. So some of the larger, now they do start to cost money. So you're talking $300, $400, $500 for a good tripod that's going to sit underneath that. You really want to pay attention to the head and what it's rated for. So if it says that it's rated for 7 pounds, then with your teleprompter and your camera and everything else, figure out what that is. The other thing that's important is when you start to add those, you want to make sure that they're balanced. So every time you put it on the tripod, you want to unlock it from the tilt position, and you want to turn its friction all the way to 0. And then you move the whole system back and forth until it just balances. It just sits there, and then you tighten everything up again. And the reason you do that is because it doesn't put more pressure on the fluid head. And so if you don't do that, over time, your fluid head will actually start to leak fluid because you're putting too much pressure on it. And so it'll actually wear down the head. And so what you want to be careful of is putting pressure on that head. So balancing it is really important. And then also matching the rating of the head, for that process. And you're probably looking at, with a camera and a teleprompter, you're probably looking at 8 or 10 pounds that you're adding to there. And that puts you in a different class of tripod head than you would normally have to make that work. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I used, for teleprompter use, about the minimum I would go with something like this Manfrotto which is about $900 the 504X fluid head and tripod. That includes the head and the tripod, though. So, and that tripod has a built-in spreader in the middle there, which is handy to have, and it has the removable pads in the feet so that you can go into carpet, and it has a little carrying case. And it's pretty tall. It'll handle up to about 25 to 30 pounds, I think. So most teleprompters these days with the LCD screens are only about, 10 to 11 pounds, maybe. So add that to the weight of your camera. It depends on how heavy a camera you have, but something like that could work for you.
Yeah, and the Benros are very similar to that. They just are a little less expensive, but and again, I find that they're panning. There's a little bit of play at the beginning and the end, so it's probably not going to work as well as the one that Courtney recommended, the Manfrotto, which I've had, the 504s. But the Benros are, you can get one that will do 11 pounds for $250 or $300. And are you going to do great, pans with it and everything else? No. Will it hold a teleprompter? Yes. So that's the thing you want to kind of look at as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Ross has the Bach Liberty module that is pin compatible with the Dante Brooklyn 2, but supports standard AES 67. Could this dethrone Dante in favor of native AES 67?
Unlikely. I think that I don't think anything's dethroned Dante at this point, but I think that there are definitely verticals that make sense. So very, very large events that want to use Ravenna that may want to do that. It may make sense, but I think for the average person that wants to network audio, Dante has kind of owns the place, and I don't know how someone would displace them at this point. Next question.
Our next question comes from Alan Jones in Vicenza in Italy. Alex, what is the name of your drawing telestrator app and when will it drop? Any other details you can share? It will drop in May. It might be the end of May, but we'll see. I'm working with Juan C. Robles on it right now. And as we add things, I'm trying to resist the feature creep. So I'm trying to resist feature creep, but we can't help a little bit of it because we're trying to make it really work seamlessly with the way that I'm trying to, make it so that it doesn't really have an interface, but you have lots of gestures, and it's going to work on both the Mac and iPad. So it's a single install for M1 and an iPad. It's not going to, I don't know if it'll go backwards after that. So anyway, so that's what we're building it for. The name is we're still working on the name. so of what it's going to call it. I had a name for it. Now we're not sure. So we're kind of working through that. But it's cool. It's got colors. So we've got 10 colors in it instead of just the one. It's a lot smoother. There's a couple things that, a lot of it, again, I don't like interfaces. And so I really want it to be something that I can be using and you never see it pop up. And so there's a lot of pieces of that puzzle that we're kind of working out. But it went from being like a little thing that we were throwing together to a really cool, in my opinion, a really cool app. And so Juan has done an incredible job on it. And we should, again, I fully expect to release it in May. We're just there's some little issues about it that I just, I'm trying to make it as a speaker, I want it to be as fluid an experience as possible. Next question. Douglas Carmichael asks, in the SpaceX Starship launch test stream, the spaceship test launch stream, they had real-time data from the rocket. How would they pipe the data from their control systems to presumably SPX?
Go ahead, John.
Cuomo has done some work for SpaceX in the past. I'm not sure if he's still doing it or not, but SPX works in conjunction with Casper as playout. We use SPX for our rocket shoot. We found the transmitters that SpaceX uses to transmit down to the ground. They're IP-based transmitters. And then from there, you have to parse the data out and feed it into something like SPX. But they've got amazing brain power inside there. And we know a few of those guys. So I don't know. I'll talk to Tuomo and see if he's got any more insight.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, John said most of it there. They have full of a lot of software engineers and developers inside SpaceX. And so it's easy for them to take the telemetry data and make a graphical representation of it, which can then be piped to all all the desks out there where they're controlling the spacecraft, so that they can just take a glance at and tell how many engines are lit up or what the attitude of the spacecraft is or altitude of the spacecraft is. So.
All right. We are shifting subjects to our second hour, and I'm talking about computer graphics. And all versions of computer graphics. And so one of the things that we're looking at on, it's a really interesting thing that I was talking to someone about. It comes up every time I talk about this day, is that when I was doing Pixel Core, it came out of mostly my work on Star Wars. And as a result, everyone was into computer graphics and no one was interested in video or audio. Like I couldn't get anybody to talk about video and audio. Like everything was kind of a dead end there. Because of this is a different time, graphics is something that is not as popular within our group, but it's something that is very, very important. A lot of what we're doing is like, how do we actually make this stuff work and how do we illustrate things? And I think there's a lot of opportunities for our organization that are coming up, and we want to make sure that we're able to take advantage of those. A lot of times, what they say is that luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and there's an enormous number of opportunities that are out there for if we're learning computer graphics, and if we build a group that's able to do that. It also just adds to a lot of the things that we're doing otherwise. And so, when I look at computer graphics for this day, I'm really looking at all the different aspects of it. So whether it's true 3D, Cinema 4D, or Blender, or Maya, or other things like that, as well as photogrammetry and LiDAR. Those are things that are all fitting into kind of the model that we have here. And so those are the things that I think are going to be interesting from a pure 3D perspective. But there's also 2D. And by the way, if you have suggestions of things that you'd like to see us cover, go ahead and throw those into Makana. But there's also the 2D. So there's the motion and the After Effects, and how do we do motion graphics? How do those build in? We've covered a lot of those different things in throughout the time that we've had this day. So it can be looking at other people's graphics like we have with some of the broadcasts, but it can also be, how do we create those and how do we make them live? So we've had, we're probably going to do more with Tuomo and more with other things with broadcast graphics of like, what is a key fill and how do we make that work? And how do we deliver those graphics, as well as, how do we drive the question that we just had, which is how do we drive data into real-time graphics? That's probably a whole second hour that we could produce there. And so I think that those are the kind of things, we're thinking about bringing folks on to talk more about Fusion, inside of Resolve, as well as motion and as well as After Effects. I've got some folks that we're talking to there. And so I think that those are, some of the things that we're considering or that we're looking at in bringing into these days. I think that you saw Alan Hawks came on and talked a little bit about his history. Starting next week, I think we're going to start bringing him in to actually just show what he's working on, or talk about specific fundamentals. Nick Jushishin is going to start spending more time with us, and so those days will become. And Nick's going to have, what we're looking at is having Nick and Alan and myself probably each take on one of the weeks of each month to talk about something specific. And then also, of course, bring in vendors to talk about the kind of, stuff that they're doing and really use those, but really use them as a way for us to work through like, what is that concept and how does that work? And I also think that computer graphics will incorporate things like, I think that it's probably leans over like where you fit 3D printing in, but I'd probably go to computer graphics because we have to build it. Like we still have to model it. So it'd probably fit more into a Tuesday than a Friday as far as that goes. So 3D printing is another thing that we may look at there. So I think these are a couple of the things that we're kind of working through. If you've got suggestions of things around computer graphics, Midjourney, of course, is another thing that we've been. By the way, I don't know. Someone posted something that they were doing in Firefly. And one thing I have learned about a lot of these models is that if it works in one place, it works in both places. And so as soon as they threw it in there, I went and tried it. And what was it? John, you'll enjoy this. This was, I hadn't padding on all sides, isolated on a white background. So that turns out like I had like over a white background or in front of a white background or whatever, and got varying levels of success when I put in padding on all sides, isolated on a white background, I'm getting the objects that I'm looking for every single time, like 100% of the time. And so us looking at how to, and you're probably wondering why I do that, by the way, is because I have lots and lots of objects that I put into my PowerPoint, or not my PowerPoint, my Keynote slides, and I need them over white so that I can key them easily. I build white slides, even though I really want to do dark slides. It's easier to key things over white slides. And so it's easier to find all the objects. And I used to try to find them on Google and find the object and throw it, key it out and throw it in. And it was much easier to do this in Midjourney. And so I build lots and lots of objects, and I make characters. So I have like a character that's confused in the style of Pixar. And now, and I want to just drop them onto my Keynote. So I have like little things like a person thinking, a person bored, a person in pain, whatever it is that I'm trying to do. Yesterday I was building trolls, and I'll give you an idea here. Hold on. Let's see if I can do this quickly and easily. But this is an example of, let's see. Sorry here. So this is like I said, geeky. It's like geeky computer troll. Padding all on all sides over a white background. And so there's those are my little trolls that I'm using to talk about trolls on internet events and so on and so forth. But so this is the kind of way that I use Midjourney anyway. But the point is that I think that we'll probably be talking about generative art inside of this day probably once a month, just to talk about like things that are working, the new things that are coming out, vendors that are working on it, because I think it's going to be something that really makes a big difference for us. So anyway, so those are some of the things that I'm thinking about as we go through this. If there's not a lot of suggestions, it'll be a really short day. so we'll see how it goes. But we're really committed to it. And I think that it's important. I think one of the things that we're looking at also is, we expect to see a lot of, whether it's actual hardware or not, we expect to see a huge push from Apple in June related to AR and USDZ. And, it's something that we really, when it comes to figuring out what can keep us all employed and working and so on and so forth, I think understanding, staying on the front edge of that, the big issue is between overseas work and, for those of us in America, between overseas work and AI, there's not going to be much of a long tail. You're going to be in the front part of what's happening, or you're not going to be able to work in the industry. So there's not going to be a long tail of you can be okay at something. And so when we look at a lot of these things, understanding it and really getting good at it is really, really important for our employability. So it's one of the things we want to pay attention to. Let's go into the first suggestion.
Sure. The first suggestion comes from Stephen Kimbrough from Berkeley, California. He'd like to see Adam Toe dive into what's happening in MixEffects and get a nice state of the tool from the stores.
I think we should absolutely bring Adam back on. We've had Adam on before. We've had some labs with him. We've had him on the second hours, but it's been a while, and I think that we could bring him on. I will say that MixEffects Pro is, I don't even know why you'd own an ATEM that's larger than the little one. The little one, you may or may not use it as much, but as soon as you have a super source, it is like the super source tool. And without it, I don't even know. I find that the super sources on the ATEM are almost useless without MixEffect. So I think that it's a pretty powerful tool. For those of you, super sources are the multiple windows that you often see. Maybe we can pull one up here while I'm talking to show a couple things. I don't know if it's set up for that way because no one raised their hand there. So anyway, but a super source is multiple, the 3 or 4 people. And so it's a version of the graphics. And so anyway, that's something to think about there. Next question.
Rob Collins is asking, how could someone new get started with making graphics to add to their video?
Go ahead, Keely.
Yeah, I had a really interesting experience watching a presentation by Laura Evans Hill from Atomic Visuals. And I think she would be a really interesting guest to bring on. Her approach is to teach people the visual frameworks in a very basic, almost stick person aspect, and trying to empower every presenter to use their own drawn pictures in order to illustrate the concepts that they're trying to get across. And this might be a little bit more educational and that sort of thing. But I thought that the systematic approach she used to the actual frameworks and how you want to be able to get information across very, very quickly through your own sketches was really, really interesting. And she might be an interesting guest, or that kind of approach to bring on to this sort of show.
Yeah, I think that looking at a lot of ways to get started is really, really important. And there's a lot of things that people can start with. Like when someone asks me, what graphics should I start with? I'm like, Keynote or Canva. Those are the two that we talk about a lot. But Keynote has so many animation tools and so many compositing tools and all kinds of bits and pieces that you can actually, I've built whole videos where I handed them to the client as a test. Like I roughed this out over a day and I'm planning to build it all in Motion or After Effects or whatever for their product. And it's 3 or 4 minutes long. And it's all, I have a voiceover and I have all the movement and everything else. And the client's like, that's great. I'll buy that. And I'm like, I'm not done with it yet. But that's the level at which Keynote is capable of doing a lot of those things. And Canva is also another good one. So when you start with some of these presentation tools, they also have a ton of tools that are already built in. And so I think that one of the things we've Keynote has kind of bounced around a little bit, but it's another thing that we're probably going to spend more time on in the future in this day, is to bring Keynote up and talk about how, because that becomes, to what Keely was talking about, like a very beginner, like you can just throw things together and you can actually export things in Keynote out with alpha channels. So if you want to add it to other things, you can build these animations that would be relatively easy. From there, I typically recommend Motion. And of course, I'm very Apple oriented. So there's a lot of, bits and pieces, but Motion is a $50 app that, the ROI on Motion to do computer graphics is stunning, and so it's a pretty, you're paying it one time forever, like that's the big thing with Motion and Final Cut, is that you don't have to pay again. And Resolve is the next one after that. So those are the things that we kind of, talk to related to doing motion graphics from a beginner perspective there. Now go ahead, Courtney.
I was going to say, if you have an Adobe subscription for Photoshop, After Effects has a lot of great templates you can use to get started. You can see how those templates work for doing on-screen graphics, for screen graphics and animation. That's a good place to start. And if you already have an Adobe subscription, it might be included in there. So take a look at that.
Yep. Yeah, and one of the other ones that we use on from the Motion and Final Cut side is motionvfx.com, and they sell, and you can get hundreds of different ones that you can buy and then put them in there. So Adobe has ones that ship with it, but it does come with a subscription cost, whereas the Motion one, there's one-time cost. That's the same price as the subscription per month. that will do a lot of those things. And so, I have to admit that it's been, I built a project in I was surprised that I could still remember all the things. I had to do a project in After Effects last week. And I still remember where all the pieces were and all the nested comps, and built all the things that were there. It was the best countdown clock ever, like that I built, or that I worked on. But it was. I was like, oh, I don't know. I could have done this in Motion. Like I did it because it was the assets were delivered to me in After Effects, but I was like, I could have done this in Motion just as easily. Next question.
It's Tommy Shantz from St. Paul, Minnesota, who currently sets the bar for graphics in broadcast and or on the web.
This is a moving target right now. The big players for a lot of these things are VizRT, Chiron, as well as XPression from Ross. And so those are the ones we see probably the most when we see something in a truck. Usually someone's coming in with a set of files, and they're going to run one of those three. Is probably the most common from a graphics playout perspective. But I think that the things that we see more often, SPX or Caspar, are things. Caspar has been around for a long time as a development platform, and so we're seeing more of those things starting to pop up that format. And then the big thing a lot of people are paying attention to is Unreal. So Unreal did something that was a little different than Unity, in the sense that Unreal figured out how to do the drop frame, so how to do 2997 as opposed to 30. And Unity chose not to do that. And it was a huge infrastructural change. When you're doing real-time video, it's not like, oh, we'll just change it to do something else. They had to change all the way the timing works and how it processed that and everything else. And so Unreal went through that work 5 or 6 years ago. And as a result, no one really thinks about anything else when it comes to broadcast. So we're seeing a lot of different Unreal solutions. There's digital set solutions. We were at the Ross booth during NAB, but there are a lot of other view technologies, which we've also had on the show. And we went and saw their light bike there. So those two are the ones that we've paid attention to the most. But they're all sitting on top of some version of an Unreal Engine, partially because of that broadcast compatibility. And so one of the things a lot of people are looking at is that, that a lot of these heavy hitters, have to pay a lot of attention to the fact that these Unreal solutions are much less expensive and coming up fast. The downside of the Unreal solutions right now mostly has to do with anti-aliasing edges. So the edges have just a little bit of aliasing that goes on the outside of them. And as that rendering gets better, we expect to see a lot more Unreal solutions coming out that are used actually for motion graphics. Next question.
Lopez Waterman is chiming in from Salisbury, Maryland. Should we revisit SPX?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we should definitely. We use it every day, like what you're seeing right now, the graphics that you're seeing at the moment, or you saw just a second ago. Those are all SPX. And so we definitely should be bringing SPX back on. So we'll get Tuomo back on and have him answer questions, and we'll talk about how we use it in the show. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael would love to have a second hour on Ross XPression and how to use it.
John.
I hope Josh is writing down all these suggestions this week, Alex.
That's the whole idea. That all we're doing is fishing for ideas.
We're doing Josh's job for him this whole week. If we can get Bo and then Doug in his trailer, both XPression would be fabulous.
Yeah, and we can probably get some folks from the XPression team on, through Bo. So I think that I think we definitely want to cover that. Yeah, the whole idea behind this week, by the way, is these all the suggestions you're putting in. We're taking track of them. We're trying to basically fill all of the days that we have in front of us between now and IBC, out, so that we, are not thinking about that. And then what we want to do is start to fill in. So we're going to basically fill out what we want to do, and then start filling extra data. So the idea is that if you see something that's going to happen on Tuesday, on Monday, or the week before, you get little links like, hey, you could check this out. Check out XPression. Here's some YouTube videos that are useful. Here's something you might want to read. You don't have to read those things, but the idea is that if you really want to get the most out of every second hour, there's a little bit of some study aids that you can watch to make sure that you understand what we're talking about. And the idea is for the folks that do that, they are going to get way more out of. They're going to be able to kind of suck all the marrow out of the second hour and get everything out of what we're talking about. They also will improve the conversation for everyone because they'll have more questions and more pointed questions because they have a little bit of ramp to figure that out. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at there. Next question.
Local Lopez Waterman is back and he's proposing, should we do a second hour about 3D CAD, Vectorworks, AutoCAD, etc.?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that would be cool, especially creating 3D objects that could also be 3D printed. That would be very nice. What I'd love to see and figure out how to do would be to convert images from AI transformers into vector 3D objects. That is an extremely difficult task to do, and I don't think anyone has done it yet, have they? Once they cross that little threshold, it's going to change a lot of stuff in the 3D CAD area and 3D graphics area.
And one thing we have to watch is that there's already I believe a AI input for Blender. So you can say, I want these objects and I want this thing, and it just creates them, And so some of those things, it's still not like as detailed as but we're at the very beginning. so I definitely think, but I think that to go back to these, I think looking at how different CAD programs are used, especially in our kinds of production, I think would be really, really useful. There's a lot of different types and they're used for different reasons. And so I think looking at how they're used in media, I think would be useful. Absolutely. Next question.
It's Dave Troutman from Edmonton, Alberta. Can we find someone to explain the data feeds into live graphics pipeline kind of a discussion?
I think that would be a good one for Tuomo. Like if we're talking about how we're passing data in and turning it into graphics and what does that format look like and how does it work? I think those would be a great one as part of the SPX discussion. But we can talk about that probably with almost every graphics package. every major graphics package has some version of a data input that's available. So we'll take a look at that. Now, next question.
Ulk is asking about graphics playback. In other words, what sends the graphics you have built to your show?
Yeah, I think that talking about the playback engines, and this gets back into the dealing with whether it's SPX or VizRT or New Blue, or there's lots of other, and I think that there's probably some version of these shows that is an overview of what it does, what are the basic requirements of a graphics package, and I think that there's probably a second hour there that's just how graphics packages work and what's important when you're looking at them. Are layers important? Is key fill output important? Is the dynamic data important? And all those things, and talking through those, and what different packages may have some of those. So I think that would be important there. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Our next question is from John Snyder. Are there any events over the next few months that are worth analyzing graphics for?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, we can definitely, let's see, the graph that are worth analyzing. I don't know, I think that we'll keep on coming back to talking about certain subject matters. I think we've talked about super sources and lower thirds again. We'll probably come back to sweepers somewhere in the future to talk about that construction of them. But as far as an event that happens, I don't know of any that are happening over the summer that would be as interesting. Now, as we build up towards the fall, one of the things that we're going to do is go to SIGGRAPH. So we are going to cover SIGGRAPH. SIGGRAPH is in LA this year, so we'll be able to. Well, it'll be a little easier for us to build a team. Usually, it bounces back and forth between Los Angeles and Vancouver, and Vancouver's a little harder. We just don't have as many people there. So LA, we think we can cover more effectively. And so we're working on getting a booth space there as well, as we are with Cinegear. I made the request. We'll see what happens. But we're going to keep on kind of improving that process there. But I think that as far as events go that we should analyze, I think we'll have to be a little bit responsive to that, because I'm not sure what's coming up that we would necessarily look at in detail. Next question.
Dave Troutman is back. Can we have a session on image file formats and their most appropriate application or artifacts in online streams?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple different file formats. There's obviously the video file formats as well as the still file formats, and what we can and can't do. So, for instance, with a ping, we'll have an alpha channel, but the TGA has an alpha channel as well. But it has the difference between a ping and a TGA typically is that the TGA has its own alpha channel as a separate channel, where the ping is a slightly different encode. And a lot of us find that we like to use the TGA, even though it's ancient, 30 years old, I think, at this point. It's an ancient format, but it's easy to process. But we can look at those. Those are just stills. And then you look at, should we use Apple ProRes and 4444 with alpha channels, or, what other formats can we use to do that type of thing? And so figuring out what the video formats are and what makes them good or bad versus the still formats, I think that's probably a whole second hour by itself. Next question.
On his back from Reno, Nevada, some topics related to USDZ file format, how to make USDZ assets, how to use them in everyday apps, and any other suggestions.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So USDZ, for those who are listening, is the Universal Scene Description, and so that's USD is the Universal Screen Description. This was created by Pixar, so they could move their scenes around, without too much trouble. Apple saw it and said, "Why don't we zip that up?" And that's what became the USDZ format. It is a Universal Scene Description that's in a zip format, and what that allows for is just one little file that can be moved wherever it needs to go. And so that it is a very, very important format in the sense that Apple is leaning heavily into it to support, a lot of things across the operating system. So if you grab a USDZ model, and a lot of them, if you go up to something like the Smithsonian, and by the way, a second hour, for those who are writing down what the second hour should be, let me see if we can get someone from the Smithsonian to talk about how they do photogrammetry, because they're doing tons of this all the time. The Smithsonian is constantly digitizing it. And I know that because you can go up to the Smithsonian site, and if you look for 3D models, if you just do a search for 3D models Smithsonian, you'll see all these USDZ models as well as OBJs and everything else. And you can download those. And what's interesting is if I text you a USDZ model from an iPhone to an iPhone, you'll just be able to open it up. Boop, it'll just pop up. And if it has a scale, it will literally pop up on your desktop at scale. or you can zoom it up and walk around it. So you can take something that's very small and walk around it with AR. You can also open it up in preview and rotate it and everything else. And so there's a lot of things, like, for instance, we build 3D models of some of the venues that we work in, and I literally open them in preview, I rotate them to where I need to go, and then I hit screen capture and I export that out. And the reason I do that is so I can quickly put it into Keynote. Obviously, there's a step there that I would prefer not to do. I really want to take the USDZ model and just drop it into Keynote and just be able to have it there. And once it's in Keynote, it means that I can imagine having any of the items that you would normally throw in, like a telephone or a globe or a pencil or whatever it is you're using for a presentation. And imagine being able to just rotate it and move it into the positions that you want. Oh, I want it to be in this presentation. I want this 3D model to be in this representation, or I want to rotate it around. I want to see the back or the front. And then, of course, you're going to want to animate that. So you're going to want to sit in Keynote, and you're going to want to be able to just move it around and have it animated, so that one of the things you could do is have things pop up and then have something rotate to another place and have those other things pop up. And then, of course, after you do that, you're going to want to be able to tap on it if you send someone a presentation and have it just appear in front of them as part of the presentation. And those are the things that we think are all going to happen with USDZ. So whether it's, it'll happen inside of Keynote, it'll happen inside of Pages, it might even happen inside of Numbers. But we expect to see that. And we see some of that already in Motion and Final Cut. And we also see some of the issues with it is that, like, when you're animating something in Motion, you're still seeing some of the aliasing that I talked about because it's rendering in real time. Whereas what we're hoping to see is anti-aliasing as we go into the new, taking full advantage of the M series chips and rendering that out. And so USDZ is a really important format, and it's probably going to become the format for AR, just because when Apple turns it on, there's a lot of other people and they're all using different formats. And Apple, it's like a lot of people are using a lot of different things, and then Apple will choose that, and it's going to go out to so many things that the reason that it's important for us to talk about USDZ is there's a gold mine sitting there. There's just gold, there's like a mountain full of gold of new 3D assets that work seamlessly with Keynote. That when Keynote is launched, it's just all the money. It's hard because I don't have enough time. I look at it and going, oh, that's going to be a big deal. And I don't have the time or effort to put the effort into it. But a couple of us are talking about building collections of USDZ models, because if they were ready the first week that Keynote was released, they'd probably sell $1 million worth of stuff, because people would just be like, oh, I want to try it out. Oh, it's $10 to get 25 items, and I want to throw them in and play with them in Keynote. But that probably won't happen. We'll probably wait until Keynote pops out, and then people will start building stuff. Next question.
It's from Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. An hour about graphics for people who don't have an eye for graphics, but still need to make something, like when to hire a graphics designer and when to DIY.
I think that there's really an important piece of that of just understanding basic rules of engagement when it comes to design. I think we could have just the 5 things you need to know about design related to white space and spacing, the golden ratio. There's a couple things that a lot of us pay a lot of attention to, that especially if you did a lot of print design, a lot of the things we learned in print design are still pretty applicable, in how we put those things together. And I think that it would be great to have just a basic design hour. So I think that would make a lot of sense. We are bringing someone on to talk about typography, which I'm pretty excited about. So talking about making fonts and what those mean and everything else. And so some of those fundamentals I think are going to be really fun to work with. Next question.
It's from Brody Hefner in New York City. Elgato Streamdeck has a growing list of graphics add-ins, and we've seen examples of interesting use cases amongst office hours regulars. How about regularly revisiting Streamdeck and Companion graphics ideas?
Yeah, I think that we could do that once a quarter. I don't know. I think once a month might be a little bit too often, but I think once a quarter, looking at different things that are using Streamdeck and Companion, and maybe even Central Control. I have been threatening to bring Chota Max on from Central Control. We just saw him at the dinner. At the dinner, we saw him. So we'll get him on to talk about it. So Central Control, Companion, Streamdeck, those are all things that we should be covering more often. Next question.
It's John Pareto from Las Vegas. It all starts with color theory. Can we get Mr. Wright back on?
I think we probably can. We'll see. We'll see if we'll see if we can get Mr. Wright to come, Steve Wright, to come back on and talk about color. And I think that getting a couple Charles would be good to have him talk about it, and it'd be great to just talk about some color theory, of understanding all these different things, of just general things, and then we are talking to some companies about HDR color and what that means and how it changes and so on and so forth. And one of the interesting things is that we're getting now very close. You saw a test of doing HDR to the live stream in 5.1. There's going to be a point over the summer and the fall where we can talk about HDR and be in HDR. Like if you have an HDR monitor, you'll be able to actually see it, or a phone. You'll be able to actually see what we're talking about, as opposed to always saying, well, if it was HDR, it would look like this. Next question.
The next question comes in from Chris Sabato in Albany, Oregon. What about vMix's GT titler?
Yeah, I'm happy to, if we have somebody that's an expert at that wants to discuss it and show us how it comes together, 100% behind bringing them on. So it's just a matter of finding the right person to talk about it. Next question.
Black Lopez Waterman is opening the Pandora's box of fonts. I know this is a topic of knee-jerk reactions for many of us. How about you?
Yeah, I think talking about the use of fonts, again, we're going to bring someone on that actually wrote a great book on fonts. And so we're going to bring her on in June. I think it's when she teaches, I think in University of Texas, actually in Austin. And so she, so she's going to be coming on. Kelsey Gray is going to be joining us in June. And so we'll, that should be a lot of fun to talk about fonts in general and what they mean and the design of them. The use of them, I think, is probably even another second hour that we could talk about, and how to use them, and why you should never use Comic Sans or Papyrus. And I think we'll just start it off with we would get a strike or whatever if we did it, but you have to look at just do Papyrus SNL, and you'll understand it's a must see. I believe that every class about topography should start with that video. So anyway, but those are the two fonts that we would like to just tell you right now not to use, but we will spend a whole second hour showing you why not to use those two fonts. Next question.
Yeah, so good. Jesse Mills from the San Francisco Bay Area is chiming in. How about using Google Slides for graphics? How well would that work when luma keyed into an ATEM? Is it possible?
It's possible. I mean, anything's possible. You just do anything over black and you can key it. The controls that you have over the graphics in the Google Slides are pretty low. It's, a lot of these, of the kind of the four big ones, what I would say is what we see 99% of the time is either Keynote, Canva, PowerPoint, or Slides. Like those are outside of that, we never see anybody do anything else. Like I'm sure that there's other apps out there that do presentations, but those are the big four that we see. What we tend to see here is that educators and a handful, educators and some business folks will use Slides, but they very rarely, if they're using Slides, they're very rarely animating anything. So they're not, it's a slide. And it does that. It's not that Google doesn't have animation tools, it's just no one uses them. And so as a result, they're not highly developed in that area. And so then, PowerPoint, it just has the culture of it has a look that isn't usually and also just what it does with fonts and stuff like that has never been seen, or it's gotten much, much better, but it was always kind of seen as kind of behind Keynote. And so you see a lot of business folks that have Office 360 using it. Canva, we see picking up speed. It's probably growing the fastest as far as people using it, and it really comes down to templates. Templates are the thing that Canva does really, really well, better than anyone else. There's just tons and tons of templates, and it's not just templates for your presentation; it's templates for your cards and templates for And I use Keynote a lot, and I asked, my wife was using Canva, and she was like putting together this whole thing with Canva. I was like, I'm just curious, why are you using Canva instead of Keynote? And she's like, templates. Like I can throw this thing in, I can put this thing together, and it all works. And then typically for most of the like high end presentations that we see that have video, we normally see Keynote. And that has been, even if someone started in something else, it usually gets converted. In fact, a lot of times companies that even made the other ones, their slides would be quietly converted to Keynote, mostly because it handles fonts and anti-aliasing better, or it did. I think that PowerPoint's getting pretty close to the quality of that. And there's something about, but there was always something about the Keynote ones that looked a little bit nicer. And then the animation tools and the control tools they play back better than the other platforms. The playback systems on a Mac, and I think it had less to do with the software itself and more that the Mac was more standardized, and so a lot of people would try to play things back on PCs that just would blow up, or lose frames or slow down or do a lot of other things. And so I think those are the big four. But I think that we can talk about what we want to do. I think that comparing those and doing what I just talked about, I just took up 5 minutes. We could have probably taken up a second hour talking about the differences of those. So comparing those would be good. But I think that I've definitely done whole presentations with Keynote where everything's keyed over top of me and around me and everything else. And it looks really cool. It's just really hard to do. Now, next question.
Alok has given me lots of practice with his name. He would also be interested in graphics with a different focus, projection design in theater, projection mapping, and content creation for this vertical.
Oh, I'd love to talk about that. I mean, it's one of the things we see some projection mapping in the United States. In Europe, it's like everything. It seems like every event has some kind of crazy projection mapping going on. And so everything we did everything I've done in Europe seemed to have a segment of it that was projection mapping. And projection mapping, of course, is you figure out the geometry of the building and you map that out, and then you have the projector in a specific place. And if it's from that angle, it can actually map something that you can see, and it looks like it's part of the building, and so on and so forth. And it's used in theater as well as exterior displays, and so on and so forth. And I would love to bring somebody on to talk more about that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you're just interested in that, go to projectionmapping.org. It's a org that shows you all types of software and what it is, explanation of it, et cetera. So it's a good place to get started in projection
absolutely. And maybe we'll bring those folks on and have them talk about it. Next question.
It's from Douglas Carmichael, building templates for SPX and using HTML5 editors to do so.
Yeah, I think that bringing Tuomo on, and I think in the mixture of talking about what SPX does, but also having him actually walk us through the basic creation of that. I also think that we have to bring Tuomo on to talk about SPX as it relates to Zoom. So there were seven companies that adopted new things with Zoom. And I think that one of the things you're going to see over the next couple of months is us slowly bringing on each one of them to talk about how they've executed what they're putting together there. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. Next question.
We're back with Brody Hefner from New York City. Clocks, countdown timers, and graphics that clearly and consistently refer to multiple time zones.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. I mean, obviously, I feel like I've done the countdown clock often enough that I don't need to do it again. But I think that we could talk about how to build those out, and definitely, we still probably could do a second hour that's just on countdown clocks, where we talk about the different ones that are on. There's web-based countdown clocks. There are, there's obviously online ones. There's ones that app-based ones. So those are all things that I think that we could do there. Yeah. Next question.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. What about something on node-based graphics, perhaps with Blackmagic Design Fusion? Yeah. I've been thinking about that for a little while, and I think that talking about why nodes work, and I think part of the problem is that I've done a lot of nodal compositing, mostly in Shake of all things, and then also Conduit, which is an app that my last company or a previous company had sold, and so I did a lot of and thinking about nodes is great. And I think that I didn't know enough about Fusion, but now I've done enough in Fusion that I feel like I could probably, find somebody to talk about that. But we'll definitely bring it on. I think that Fusion's probably the easiest one because everyone can download it. So we would probably do things that are available in the free version of Fusion. I think it's probably the only free thing that we could get that everyone could play along. So I think we'll take a look at that. Next question. It's from Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin. The most annoying graphics, especially how people use graphics for their commercials, shows, and more, like TikTokers do. How can they make a show pop while others cringe?
I think it'd be good. I mean, I think it's already passed, but the unbearable likeness of greatness or whatever, the Nick Cage thing that had Nick Cage and I almost captured that clip at full resolution and sent it to a friend of mine or a company that I work with to roto it. And then I was going to put it back online going, here, like here is a properly rotoed version of this clip, so that when you do your TikToks, it doesn't look all nasty. Like I can just, here's a perfectly one. I so wanted to do that because bad mats, super sad to look at. And it would have, so I'm now looking, now that I've thought of it, if I see another one that happens like that, my temptation is going to be to go ahead and, donate the $200 that it'll take for me to have it rotoed for that little clip, so that we can just put it up and people can just be like, okay, that now I can use it with my TikTok properly. All right, next question.
Loke has another one. Should we discuss signal path and wiring diagrams? How do you like them? All the wires, some or grouped together?
A second hour on wiring diagrams would be great. A lot of us have a wide variety of opinions about how we approach those. And I'll see if I can it'd be good to get Marty Brennis on, because Marty does the really heavy ones, in CAD. And when I look at his, my eyes just cross, and I build complex ones, but then there's like how to build an entire post facility in wiring diagrams with every single wire tagged, this is what it looks like. And I think that'd be good. Be good to talk about. Next question.
Welcome to John Tenhouse from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Any plans for an Unreal 5 virtual production deep dive?
Yeah, we'd love to. And I think that when we talk about Nick coming on, Nick is probably going to do more of those, talking about Unreal and giving us some overviews. And he's been there before. We tried to do some labs, and we didn't have enough people show up for them, to be honest. And so on Saturdays, and so we kind of pulled back from doing a lot of Unreal work. But I think it's been a while, so covering some of the new stuff and talking about it, I think would make a lot of sense. And I think that Nick also did a fun little short that he was one of the Unreal Fellows. There's a fellowship thing that you can do for a couple months and put something together. And Nick actually was part of that program. And so it might be fun to have him break down his virtual production that he built there. Next question.
There's more from Brody Hefner. How about exploring some examples of comprehensive corporate or organizational style guides?
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I think that it's hard because a lot of the ones that, I've seen some incredible ones, and the hard part is finding ones that you're allowed to show. They're not, they're sent to me, but there's an NDA connected to them, and I haven't been able to figure it out. And there's teams that put together some pretty incredible style guides, and it's expensive. A style guide done for a large corporation might cost $150,000 or more. Some of them are millions. Where they put them and they painstakingly put together these 50, 60 pages of, this is how you use the logo. This is not how you use the logo. This is what it has to look like. I know that I did one with the Nat Geo one. It's like, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can't do this. Don't ever do this, don't ever do this, don't ever do this. And so there's just a lot of in between, but talking about that would be great. Yeah, next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada is back. Best practices for visualizing data in video format.
Yeah. And there's a new app for After Effects, actually, that Digital Anarchy put out that is just to take your data and visualize it. So I think that there might be an opportunity to bring them on to talk about it. But I think that in general, visualizing that data, it would be a really, really good subject for us to talk about, because that might be taking, I think one that's really interesting is taking spreadsheets of data, and how do I take that data and not have to type everything in, but have it roll in and do what it needs to do to show. That would be, I think, a really good one. Another one that we haven't done yet because I don't feel like I know it well enough, but I had to do some visualization, some music visualization, and I found it fascinating. I don't feel like I know it well enough yet to do a lot more on it. So I'm looking at trying to bring some people on that kind of specialize in that. And I'm building some stuff inside of both the two things that I've been playing with are both Cinema 4D as well as Motion, of bringing those things in and dynamically making it. But there's some apps to do it as well. And so I've been looking at what we might be able to talk about there. It's kind of cool. Next question.
Lolo Lopez Waterman is back. Can we talk about graphics in real life, aka set design?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, something about pre-visualization, so set design and previs combined. So, creating storyboards and lighting diagrams and, basic previs stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think, and I think that, we've done a lot in set design where it's a whole different set of rules because now there's logistics. Not only do we have to think about what is it going to look like, but what are the materials that we're going to use and how are we going to build it? And there's a lot of bits and pieces to make that work. Absolutely. Next question.
We're back with John Snyder. Assuming Apple releases their headset, immersive graphics.
Yeah, and I think that we have to keep paying attention to those, even if Apple doesn't release something, because immersive graphics are going to become something that's more and more and more important. As we move forward, there's a lot of things that are happening in this area it's going to be interesting. Yeah, I mean, the idea of headsets is not going away. it's not gonna fade away. I think that people think it might, but there's a lot of money going that direction, and it's the reason I'll say that is I did a lot of work in it, and I will say that 90% of the work that I did, we knew it wasn't going to work. Like we were like, this is dumb, but there's a check. so like we'll do whatever we'll do whatever you need to do. It's your nickel, and we just play full out to make it work. But there was 10% of the time that was so magical that you were like, oh, people will want this all the time. Like when it worked, it was so great that it was like I could see why people would want to leave their headsets on all the time in those moments. But those were fleeting moments or individual games or other things like that. And so I think that I can see what's possible. It's just that we're not right now. The industry is not piecing enough of those together at one time to make it worth it. Next question.
More from Tolok in Salisbury. How to pass an augmented reality workflow into your productions?
Yeah. So I think that this is going to become something we pay more and more attention to as we move forward. And I think that we're going to probably see a lot. There's going to be a lot of interest after June. So we're probably not going to do something before June, but after June, I think we're probably going to pay a lot of attention to it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, think about this application, Tlaloc. You go into the set, you do your lighting layout with your CAD software with a design of the set already built into the CAD software. You put on your goggles, you go in the set, and you look around and you see where every light is going to be, and every light is represented up in the grid or up in the ceiling or down on the floor, etc., that you're going to use to light that particular set. And as you walk around the set, you can see where the camera's going to be, where the lights are going to be, where the sound boom can be without casting shadows on the walls. And all that stuff could be done with augmented reality. Whether it'll ever happen, probably not.
So we've used some of it in previs already, and we did it because we had some test apps that we were using with Oculus, and what we did is we scanned a hotel room, a ballroom, and then we built the sets that we were going to do inside of SketchUp, and then we exported those out into a real-time render, and they're pretty realistic looking. And this was probably, 6 or 7 years ago. And the clients immediately, they walked in and they were like this, they made decisions that they would never make until they saw it. They made a whole bunch of things that they really liked. And the problem really is that the import and export process was too cumbersome at that moment. The question of whether it was valuable was undeniable. Like it was like it immediately people saw why they'd want to do it. It's just that the money wasn't there to do it, and what I mean by that is that there just wasn't, it took too many hours. And I think that this is what the rumor is that Apple's spending an enormous amount of energy on, is making sure that it's easy to develop content for their headset if they actually are going to release one. And if that actually happens, then we're talking about doing these kinds of things, relatively easily. And if that happens, I think that this is going to become a really important vertical. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I had the chance to work on Poseidon Adventure, the new one, the more recent one, and doing previs and set extensions on the set with so that VizRT created an interactive interface so that they could load their set extensions in, and the camera's mounted on a Luma crane or Techno crane, and it can move around within the existing set on the soundstage, but that set in reality, once the CGI is done, is 3 or 4 stories tall, but it's only 1 story tall on the set. So they could, so the director can see on the monitor when the camera tilts up, it'll seamlessly blend the 3D implementation of the set extensions on, and that came in pretty handy. But what we found out is it just became too impractical to use in day-to-day film production because the details of tweaking the camera to get all the encoders and everything to work in real time it just took too long for every setup, and it slowed them down, so they abandoned it after about 3 days.
Yeah, one of the things that what's happening now and what we're seeing with some of the AR stuff is that you lock that in, and there's a couple different things that we've been seeing here, and there's probably a discussion here. I don't know how we structure this in a second hour, but the main thing is that there are different layers. So GPS tells me roughly where I'm at. And then one of the things we've done is scan locations, and then we build hashes out of those locations. And what I mean by that is that we don't want to throw 10 gigs of data at your phone. But if we have enough details that your phone locks into, it can know where it is. It says, oh, if this corner of this sign and that is over here, then I know where I'm at. And so if you mix GPS that gets you into, let's say, an arena, and then you have ultra wideband, that can get you within 6 to 10 inches of location. So the GPS gets you within a couple feet, ultra wideband gets you within a couple inches, or 6 to 10 centimeters, so really like 2 or 3 inches. Now, when I search that database in that arena, I don't have to search the whole thing. I'm pretty sure where you are. And now it makes the sorting of that hash really efficient. And so within a second, I can go, oh, I know exactly where you are. And because I have all that parallax, you'll see that when it asks you to move your phone, because I see that, I can get down to a point where I know where you are in that arena to a millimeter, like where the phone is. I don't know where you are, but I know exactly where that phone is, where the lens is, where the point is. Now I can add all these graphics on top of that, and it's going to all match all of the 3D and all the other bits and pieces. And when you think about why would you need that? Well, you could turn you're going to a Kings game up in Sacramento. You could be, you could have all kinds of things happening. Simple things like, where are the restrooms? There's a big arrow just big 3D arrow that points towards where you need to go, or where is the hot dogs, and it tells you where to go there. But it can also be adding all kinds of cool effects and basically taking a venue and turning it into something else if you pick up your phone, or if you put glasses on. I don't think you're going to put a lot of glasses on at the beginning, but the phone can be this kind of window into an entire other location. Other things that, we scanned my family golf course and my family's golf course. And one of the things we looked at is you could play entirely different games. If you're an AR, you pick up the phone, you think, and there's targets on the thing that if you hit those targets, you get extra points, or you do something. So you could play a different version of golf that has nothing to do with the version of golf that we normally play. And so you could do all kinds of things by picking up your phone or whatever while you're playing. And so those are all things that we think, and then you think about going to a castle and it's showing you what it used to look like and what it looked like when Henry V was there, or Henry VIII was there, or, with people and things and everything else. And you're just looking around and seeing all this stuff. And we think that those are some of the opportunities that are out there to take advantage of. Next question.
Yeah, it's from Brody Hefner in New York City. How about design of consistent, functional, and attractive thumbnail graphics styles for video playlists?
Go ahead, Keely.
I would absolutely love this as a person who's putting content on YouTube. Thumbnail design is really important. And now that YouTube is finally manifesting their whole plan to really take over the podcast space, the idea that podcast covers are YouTube thumbnails and vice versa is going to be something that people are really going to be playing with. And if anybody has J Alto on speed dial, that would be amazing, or somebody similar who's really precisely a thumbnail expert that can come in and talk about those principles would be absolutely amazing.
I'm on a forum that there's a whole section that's just thumbnails. That's all they talk about. And there's lots and lots and lots of well, what about this thumbnail? And is this better than the other one? And most of them have something to do with that seems to be the key. Open your mouth and look surprised, and you're going to get someone to click on it. Next question.
Yeah, it's from Douglas Carmichael. Entering the graphics or video effects industry and the training programs for it.
Yeah, no, I think that I think that would be a really interesting one, and I think that talking about the basic principles that you need to understand. So, understanding the basics of framing and space and time and everything else, and then also understanding things like keyframing. Whether it doesn't matter what you're doing and where you're at, understanding how keyframing works is important, whether it's 3D or 2D. And so understanding what those look like, I think the fundamentals of graphics, I think would be really, really useful there. Next question.
It's from Douglas Carmichael, comparing talent development programs in the industry like ILM's Jedi Academy.
Yeah. I think that looking at a lot of those would be useful. And we might be able to bring somebody on from ILM to talk about that. So we'll see what we can do there. All right. Well, that was a good hour. At the beginning of the hour, I was like, well, we've got 3 questions. This is going to be really short. Like I was thinking like we might finish by 8:10. And I was like, I don't even know what to do with the other. I had a meeting that they wanted to do at 8:30. I was like, I might be able to make that meeting now. And I told them I can't do it because I'm on this show. So anyway, great set of, this really helps. I know this week it can be a little bit long because we're going through all these suggestions, but I got to tell you, this is one of the most important weeks every quarter or every 3 or 4 months that we do this. These are some of the most important ones we have because they help us define those. We get to know what you want as viewers, as producers, not just what we think might be cool. So it's really, really important. We take copious notes, continue to put suggestions into the second hour suggestion pipe. That's inside of Discord, but this is a really, really useful one for all of us here. So definitely, keep those coming. The rest of the week is the same. So through the next 4, whether it's audio, video, infrastructure, education, we're going to be talking about this and gathering and this is defining what's going to happen between now and early September. So it's really worth coming. It's really worth putting in those suggestions. You're driving this conversation as the producers. And so please, more please. Anyway, thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. It's always great to see everybody here every morning. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end that makes this happen every single week. And we keep talking about this, but it's an incredible way to meet other people and to make friends and to learn how to do all these things, but also it's about learning, but it's also about really socializing with other folks. That there's an incredible team for me. And I admit, everybody has their own, way of socializing. For me, it's just like, I want to do a project. That's how I get to know people. is people who show up for projects, people who do projects. Those are the people that I gravitate towards are people who are operators, people who are doing things. And so I look forward to the coverage that we're doing at Cinegear and SIGGRAPH, but I also think that I'm going to be jumping into the back end soon in the next couple of weeks, whenever they can make space for me on Saturdays and possibly some other days. I'm going to start jumping in and trying to do the edit for the show and figure out how to do the graphics. I realized that I don't know how to do those things. I was describing how it works at NAB, and I was like, I haven't actually done it myself, which I'm a little embarrassed by. So anyway, so I'm going to try to catch up with this incredible team to put that together. So stay tuned for that. We'll see. I'll probably make a lot of mistakes. And of course, thanks to the producers for all the great questions and keeping this show going every day. We can't do this. We can't do it without the panelists. We can't do it without the production team before and after and during the show, as well as the panelists and as well as the producers asking those questions. So thank you all for your contribution. We traveled 81,000 miles, 130,000 kilometers, 644 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. Mac break today. They call it Bello Yellow. Yeah. I thought my troll turned out really well, but the padding on all sides over, isolated on a white background. When I saw it tweeted out, it was something for Firefly. I was like, I never thought of that prompt. There's a new AI, Leonardo AI, which they say it looks as good